Burke, our Assistant Vice Presidents, and timekeepers extraordinaire. Timekeepers extraordinaire, remember that. Okay. Committee chairs, we have our membership chair, Tracy Gore, who keeps us up to date. Our senior advocate chair, where is Francis Pinn? Our other co-chair communications, who keeps our website up to date, Michelle Morton. And am I leaving anyone out? Am I missing anyone? No? Okay, great. All right, so we've been really busy planning candidate forums and other events for you to keep you up to date on what's going on. We really consider what we do a community service, and we really thank you for your support in supporting us. Please mark your calendars for April 5th, when we will be having our next candidate forum, and there we will be hearing these candidates for State Senate for the 26th Senate District to replace Ted Lieu, the 33rd Congressional to replace the retiring Henry Waxman, and the 3rd Supervisorial to replace termed-out Zev Yaroslavsky. So that should be quite a day. We have Dave Dayan as our moderator of the day. I believe Dave is here. Dave, are you here? Yay, Dave, and he's excellent. One of the brightest bulbs around, and you can follow him on Salon and really learn a lot with a lot of links. And then also on May 3rd, we'll have our state constitutional candidate forum with our Secretary of State candidates, as well as our controller, state controller, the assessor, sheriff, and judicial. It'll be a long day. Both days will be long. We'll be serving some lunch, and it's going to be at our old homestead, the old Peace and Justice Center, as we used to call it, at the Venice United Methodist Church on Lincoln and Victoria, the big church hall. So we hope that you'll all be out there to come and join us. To let you know a little bit of what we've been doing, we have, with board approval, we are now giving a monthly contribution to Act Blue to help them in their efforts to support and help elect Democratic, they're the clearinghouse for Democratic candidates. So we're helping them because they always ask for a little donation. When you donate, not everybody gives. So we're helping. West LA Dem Club is giving a donation. Yeah, let's hear it for us, right? And then we've been hearing from representatives at our board meetings, which you're all welcome to attend, generally on the first Mondays of the month. This month it'll be the last Monday since there's five Mondays. It'll be on the 31st. Last meeting, we endorsed Ted Lieu's voter instruction, SB 1272, which is a voter instruction asking us to approve having a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, which was Prop C, which did pass and which our club endorsed, I think 2 years ago, I think it was. So that's gone, and we endorsed that. We also endorsed Raise LA along with Lane minimum wage ordinance proposed. It's going to the City Council for a vote, and we'll raise the minimum wage for hotel workers to $15 and change. So I have to say yay on that. And on that note, at the CDP convention last month, our CDP Secretary, Daraka Larimore Hall, gave a great speech on Sunday on income inequality. And it had the audience really just out of their seats and cheering, because income inequality is such an issue for us here in our country, and it's not right. And we will be showing that film also very soon, this Inequality for All. So, anything else? Well, you know what? I think there's. Maybe we'll put it in the e-letter, Kelly. More things that went on at the convention, because I think the reason you're all here is to hear from these candidates. One of these candidates is going to be our next assembly person, okay? The assembly person to represent us in the 62nd Assembly District. We have questions that were brought from our Elections and Endorsements Committee, from our Executive Board, and from our members. Many, many questions were submitted. We took what we could to not go on all night, and we'll hear it. We'll be doing the forum now. It's going to be moderated by Lauren Scott. Lauren is, as you know, most recently he was elected the VP Political of our club. He is a middle school science teacher as well as the elected Political Action Committee member for both UTLA and CTA, which he represents 35,000 teachers in LAUSD. He is also a delegate to the CDP, sitting on the Legislative Committee, and also sits on the Resolutions Committee of the LA County Party Democratic Central Committee. But what I think makes Lauren especially qualified, whoa, wait, we have to get rid of a dog. What I think makes Lauren especially qualified to be the moderator of this forum is that he himself is a former candidate for Assembly in the recent 54th Assembly District race. So let me introduce now Lauren Scott. Thank you, Peter. It's all yours.
Okay.
Take my clipboard and go.
All right, the noise is gone. Thank you, Kelly. I was going to say the whole thing was going to happen through my speech here. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm a school teacher, so I have to get that back. Thank you so much for letting me moderate this. My name is Lauren Scott, and I'm looking very forward to this and have been for a long time. Welcome to the West Los Angeles Democratic Club's endorsement forum for the 62nd Assembly District. And currently we have 4 candidates here, and we were supposed to have 6. I don't know what happened to the other 2, but we will go with what we have. And so to my far right we have Paul Kouri. Right here we have Simona Farrise. Here we have Gloria Gray and Burke. So let's welcome them all. Thank you. Okay, so candidates, let's jump right into it because we don't have a whole lot of time. So candidates, you'll have, as Cara said, you'll have 2 minutes for opening and closing. The microphones are being passed out right now. You will have, you will have 1 minute to answer all the questions. And the timekeepers are Marianne Tyler and Mark Salzberg, and there they are right there. So please keep your eye on the timekeepers. And the speaker order was chosen by random numbers, and we will rotate the order of each question. So if Paul is first, the next question, Simona will be first. Okay? So, let's start with the first question. Candidates. Oh, that's a very good point. You know, they're like, let's hurry this along, so I'm just trying to hurry it along. Okay, so let's do the opening statements. Paul, you're up.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for the invitation to come here tonight. I had a conversation with Cara a couple weeks ago, and it was great to have a conversation and then come out and meet some of the membership here. So, yes, that's great. Thank you. 145. My name is Paul Kouri. I'm a former high school teacher here in LAUSD. I used to teach, my last job was actually at Venice High School. I'm a veteran, and I'm currently a businessman working in the aerospace sector. There are a lot of big issues that are facing not only our district but also our state. And the reason I got involved in this campaign is because I really don't like the direction we're going in. I feel like there are some very, very difficult decisions that we're not making, not only about where we are today, but also where we're going. Where do we want California to go? Where do we want our state to be in 5 or 10 or 20 years? I think one of the crucial decisions that we have to make is how we're going to educate our kids. Now, as a former teacher, I have always been interested in education. And I think one of the biggest problems we have right now, and let me back up for a second. I'm curious, is anybody here a teacher besides Lauren? Retired, beautiful, beautiful. I am a big advocate of the Common Core curriculum. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's about teaching students how to be critical thinkers, which is going to be such a vital skill for kids going forward. When we start looking out in the coming decades, the jobs are going to be basically one of two types. They're going to be the high-pay, high-skill jobs, or they're going to be the low-pay, low-skill jobs. And I think when you look out in the long term, what we need to do is make sure that our decisions address jobs today, when we start talking about infrastructure, but also where we want the direction of our state to go. And it's the infrastructure improvements and the education improvements that are going to make us more competitive. Thanks.
So Simona, yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out on what is your personal time. I appreciate the engagement in democracy. I am here as a candidate, I am here as a mother, and I am here as a person who has had the opportunity for education because other people who never knew me stepped up, stepped out of their comfort zone, and tried to make changes. My experience as a mother guides every aspect of my life. It is my absolute duty to try and improve the situation for my own children, for other people's children, as we move forward. I firmly believe that there are changes that need to be made, and it does start with each and every one of us. For me, I've spent 20 years as a lawyer holding corporate polluters accountable to people who they have harmed and killed. I have stood up with people who have been discriminated against, women who have been harassed, and people who could not have a voice. I decided to enter this race because I think that the issues of public safety, and by that I don't just mean law enforcement, I mean law enforcement, environmental safety, and other aspects that we have to be concerned about are truly important. I'm concerned about education and the opportunities to create the conditions for all children to learn in this district. Finally, I'm concerned about jobs, and not just minimum wage jobs, living wage jobs, and also jobs with companies in our communities that are good community partners, that they don't pollute, that they pay a fair wage for a fair day's work. And finally, because I have the responsibility for health of my own mother and my own grandmother, I have to be concerned about what we are doing with our seniors. So thank you so much for inviting me. I certainly appreciate it.
Gloria, 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and let me also thank all of you for being here, because you're absolutely right, Simona, that it is an opportunity for everyone to be engaged and hear the candidates. I want to thank the club, West LA Club, for holding this forum. Again, my name is Gloria Gray. I live in the 62nd Assembly District for many years. I'm also currently an elected official. Out of all of the candidates, I do serve and I represent about 200,000 constituents. I was elected to the West Basin Municipal Water District Board. I'm also vice chair of Metropolitan Water District, and I serve on a statewide commission called the Delta Stewardship Council. I have at least 20 years of experience in community service. I have been serving this community for over 20 years. And if you read my resume, I have a long history of serving on many boards. I'm also a commissioner appointed by Mark Riley Thomas. I also was a former hospital commission. I also retired from the Department of Health Services recently, and so I have health care, water and the environment, and education in terms of my background. There are many issues that are in this district that needs to be addressed. Jobs are certainly one issue. Homelessness, I understand, is an issue. The environment, health care, education, those are all important issues that we need to have someone who has a proven record of leadership and experience to really address those issues. So I ask for your support. I ask for you to be my partner in serving you as your next legislator, and thank you very much for listening.
Autumn, 2 minutes.
You ready? My name is Autumn Burke. Thank you, like everyone else, I want to thank you for coming. The one thing I have really learned about this Democratic Club is that You are passionate and you are very committed to our community, and I want to thank you for that as someone who lives here and who benefits from all that you have all done and all that you have all fought for so long. I want to thank you for that as someone who lives here. So that's first. Second, some people know that I come from a family of service. My mom obviously was supervisor of LA County for a long time, but our family service started long before that. My grandfather started his janitor union at MGM when they were about to privatize. And so I have seen the effects, and I have seen how incredible, can you barely hear me? Sorry, I have a little cold. I have seen the benefits that come from service, and I have seen what helping people can do. And so for the last 15 years, I have been a small business person. I've worked in real estate. I have worked in land use. I've worked for foundations, but I've also worked to educate the community on in-home care. My goals for this community are very simple. I want to encourage responsible companies to come to our community, not just come and take from our community, but I think they should be responsible to us as well. We need them for our general service funds, we need them for our services, and we need them for our schools, but we also need to hold them accountable. And that's really my goal here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, wonderful. We're off to the questions, and candidates, please limit your answers to 1 minute. So, every campaign, we hear about all the great things you would do if you were elected. That said, what would be your first legislative priority that you would pursue in the office? So, let's start with Simona this time.
Thank you. There are so many things that I want to start with, but one that I think is we need to find a way to take corporate money out of politics. I suggest that, for instance, we look at having, so that the good leaders in our community can really rise and lead the communities that they are invested in. I suggest, for instance, that instead of some of the suggestions that I've heard where we put on consumer products or we disclose from PACs who they are and where they've given money to, that we take public corporations and we require them to disclose in their annual reports to shareholders. Here are the PACs, here are the politicians, here are the public races that we have given our money to, so that as shareholders and as consumers, we can look at those corporations and say, do they have our values or do they not have our values? And if they do not, then we will use our economic collective power as people to send them the message that this is not how we want our political system to be. We want our values to define politics and not politics to define our values.
I totally agree with the last speaker. I think certainly when you look at anyone serving as an elected official, it really should be a representative of the community. So political financing reform is absolutely necessary. You cannot buy seats. You have to have people who are in the community, who have served you, you know their record, and you know their leadership skills. Because there's so many issues in this community, I can talk about whether it's development, but I think one real issue that is so important is the fracking issue. Nobody really wants to talk about that as a legislator, but I know that Holly Mitchell has a bill, I think it's 1132, that's pending right now. And I think that's a very important bill for this community. So certainly I would be looking at that, but besides just looking at the fracking bill, I would convene a task force to look at issues that are involved, that this community has. And so I think that's important, getting input from the community and working on those issues that they bring to the legislator. Thank you.
The number one issue for me would be, especially for this district right now, we're going through a tremendous growth. And so density is clearly a tremendous issue here. Making sure that growth is done responsibly, mansionization, these are the kind of issues that I think are going to be number one, and making sure that we have the infrastructure in place as we do grow. We have to watch out for traffic, we have to watch out for density, and like I said, we have to watch out for the infrastructure. So that would really be my first priority going up to Sacramento.
Paul?
My first priority would be to reduce class size. I think that education is in what I would call a triage state right now because our school scores are not good. I think that would allow, obviously create some very good jobs for teachers. It's also going to help prepare kids to go to the next grade. We have a couple of problems, and I think class size is a huge one. I also think we have something that's called social promotion, which has got to end. So I'm not talking about some kind of an omnibus education bill, but I do think that getting class size down immediately will be great. It's going to help keep focus on education because when we go back to the Common Core curriculum, I think the hardest part with that is going to be keeping your eye on the ball. And I'm afraid that when you look at something like education, it is probably the most difficult thing for government to execute well. So I think that along the way you've got to have steps, and that's why I'm all in favor of.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. And you bring up my favorite issue, which is actually regarding the second question. So why don't we start with Gloria this time? And the question is, elements of education reform are in the front pages daily across the country. There's been legislation by Parent Revolution giving more power to companies and individuals. Students First, with Michelle Rhee at the helm, pledged $1 billion to reform education by helping privatize it. What are some areas in which you feel education falls short? And what would you support to fix those issues?
Well, education is extremely important, and I served on the school board in the city that I live in for 8 years, and certainly I have so much interest in making sure that our kids are educated. But we never put enough funding. We don't put enough funding into education, not only in this state, but nationwide. But I know there's an effort, there's a bill that I think will be very beneficial to public schools, and I do support public schools. I know there are a number of charter schools, but I support public education. Local control funding, I think, would be very, very important because it would allow school districts to make decisions about where that money goes, because one of the issues is really not enough funding goes directly to classrooms. And so that's a real big issue. So I think the local control funding formula would be very helpful to school districts. Thank you.
For me, actually, my sister has been a teacher in the district on and off for almost 20 years now. So I think I have a little bit of perspective from her on what happens in our schools. Right now, I believe Prop 98 is temporary. I think that it's incredibly important, like I said, to bring more companies into the district that are responsible because we need that money for the general services. Right now, we have Prop 98, but we won't have it forever. While we have Prop 98, it should be the floor, not the ceiling on funding. So right now, I mean, the reality is we are failing our students. We are the lowest per pupil, and we need to do better. So first of all, like I said, I'm going to encourage responsible economic growth because that goes to the schools. And second of all, we may actually end up having to extend Prop 98.
So I always love the distractions when people talk about privatizing schools. Public schools are a market failure. That means they are not created to make a profit. When you try to privatize, that's the underlying goal. But it's very interesting what's been happening recently with our schools. We have a lot of different public-private organizations, the Eli Broad Academy and the Gates Foundation. There's a lot of different groups that are coming in and they're bringing in new ideas. I'm not in favor of privatizing because I think it reduces the core. And part of the core of education needs to be a unified front. When you splinter with private schools and charter schools and public schools and magnet schools, you lose the focus. And I know that's going to be a common theme for me tonight, but I think that's a big deal because it's easy to forget about education.
Thank you. I guess, again, I start with my views about education, with my views as a parent. Today, my daughter Jay Farrise is here, and she's 9 years old. My oldest daughter is 22 years old, and my son is 17. So I have seen every kind of education system imaginable. My children have attended private school. They've attended public school. I am not in favor of privatizing and corporatizing public education. Public education is, by definition, accessible to all comers, and we must maintain that. How to make children successful actually is not a mystery. We need to, as parents, as a community, as schools, create the conditions to make children successful. And that is, number one, investment in them from the very beginning. Early childhood education all the way through college. It means that college needs to work in terms of offerings and affordability. It means that we need to pay our teachers more because they are on the front lines of this war that, for education that we claim we care about so much. So we need to put our money where our mouth is, and it needs to be local and effective.
Thank you. So, next question is going to be, we're going to start with Autumn this time. And Autumn.
Mike, a little closer, sorry.
Okay. On February 28th, the LA City Council approved a moratorium on fracking. And last weekend at the California Democratic Party convention, the governor was publicly criticized over his pro-fracking stance, which he justified by pointing out that Californians drive over 330 billion miles a year, just in California, and 99% is fossil fuel. Now, considering this, do you feel that we should continue with fracking as an option to maintain those levels? If not, where and how do you feel that we can make up for that loss of fossil fuel extraction?
First of all, I 100% support the moratorium on fracking. Yeah, I mean, and let's give it a hand because I think that we all should really support that for a multitude of reasons. One, obviously, water contamination. But I also think it's tremendously important at this time to prepare ourselves to start to converting to clean energy. And so whatever we need to do, if we need to make available in apartment buildings for people who don't live in homes, who can't plug in their cars, ways to plug in their cars, or whatever we need to do to take people off of using fossil fuel, we need to start working on that now. And we have to start working on it not just for our upper class, not just for our middle class, but for our people, the people who struggle financially, because they really will see the benefits of not having to purchase that gas. So no fracking for me, thank you.
I second that. I would never vote in favor of fracking for a number of reasons. The first is that if you take a look at what's happened in North Dakota as a result of fracking, there is mass pollution of water sources, of lakes and ponds. There's also, there's ancillary, there's these little filters that go on the sandblasting. I mean, it's extensive. And to bring that here to California is bad news for a lot of reasons. Also, why in the world would we frack when we have the largest number of earthquakes of any state in the Union? Fracking has been shown that it can cause earthquakes. Now, a lot of times they're very shallow earthquakes, but even to introduce that into our state seems absolutely absurd. What are we going to do about it? I think it's fine that gas prices are where they are. We all want them to be lower, but guess what happens when prices are a little bit high? People don't drive as much, and they move more to public transportation. Stop. Thank you.
So I think fracking is easy. I'm against fracking, as I would imagine the rest of the group is. But fracking actually gives rise to a larger issue, which is what we want for our environment. Right now, the focus is on fracking. When they had, for instance, the oil spill off of Santa Barbara, it created an environmental movement that led to the Clean Air Act. Today, we have to really pay attention to that. Our children deserve clean air, clean water, and a clean food supply. And I'm dismayed that the governor had the comments that he did, but I'm also dismayed that the governor did not fully fund the agencies of this state, which actually are the ones who enforce the regulations that we have right now for clean air, clean water, and a clean food supply. So that is, fracking in some ways is easy. Of course not, but we have to come up with smart solutions. And again, we have to not balance our budget on the backs of our environment and on our children and on other vulnerable communities. Thank you.
I absolutely oppose fracking. I think that was one of the issues I said was a priority for me. If I were in the Assembly now, I would be authoring the bill that Holly Mitchell has on, that she's doing right now. You know, fracking has potentially so many issues. We talked about the environmental issue, but the potential health issue. No one really knows what fracking will do. No one really knows what the result of fracking will be, whether it can cause an earthquake or what. But I am opposed to it. I think we should look at alternatives to clean energy. I think we should look at electric cars and certainly support that more for our community. And so I do oppose fracking. That's absolutely, it has to stop. Thank you.